but I've been anointed king.
Did you really think you could just come into my house and take what is mine? I am the prophet, and I am the king. I do not fear you, but me should fear.
Hey brothers and sisters, welcome back to these Behaviour Revolution scriptures. We've been getting very close to home in the last few videos. Yahusha is definitely getting closer to his bride. And as we know from our study so far, when Yahusha gets closer, it gets hotter. It gets hotter. All the impurities rise up. It's powerful. His purity burns like the fire of perfection, yeah? And so do we want to run or do we want to walk closer? Say, burn me, Yahusha, bring me closer and closer, because that's what relationship with him is like. He's burning all the imperfections out of us, all the filth. And today we're going to go even deeper into this because we're going to see the dwelling place. We're going to see the priesthood and how Yahusha feels about the people who are tending to not only his dwelling place, but to his people and to his reputation on this earth. So without any further ado, look at your screen. We're going into the priest wars. Priest wars. Levite gangland, order of blood. The priest wars. And yeah, I'm having a bit of a joke here, but it's pretty serious what we're going to see today. Because in our last episode, we were introduced to this guy named Eli, the high priest. And he's not quite who he seems to be, and his sons are a whole nother issue. So let's not wait any longer. Let's go into it, guys. Priest wars. What are we up to? Samuel's just been dropped off at the tabernacle, and Hannah's rejoicing. She had that whole big psalm of rejoicing, remember? And so now Samuel's been left with Eli, the high priest. And remember, he's about 5 or 6 years old, give or take. So let's come to chapter 2. Now, the high priest of Israel was Eli, and his 2 sons were priests, but they were dishonest, wicked, and didn't know Yahusha or care to, and refused to obey him. Think about this, the high priest. Remember we went through all that in Exodus, Leviticus? The high priest. What is required of the high priest once a year? What are all the clans of Levites required to do in service to the tabernacle? We explored all that too. So we know how high the bar is, and now we're going to see what these dickheads are doing. So Eli, who we've already met, he's the one who had the encounter with Hannah, thought she was drunk. And Samuel's been handed to him. He's got 2 sons, and these guys are dishonest, wicked, and don't know Yahusha or want to. They don't care. So, while the people were boiling the meat from their sacrifices, it became an actual rule. This became an actual rule that these priests would send over a servant with a large 3-pronged flesh hook to stick into the cooking pot, and whatever meat came out onto the hook was taken back to the priests. And this is how these 2 priests treated every Israelite who came to offer sacrifices in Shiloh, like their own private little smorgasbord. Sometimes when the people were offering sacrifices, the servant would come over and take meat, even before the fat had been cut off and sacrificed to Yahusha. Dun, dun. That's a big no-no, because remember the patterns? Remember, the fat actually belonged to Yahusha and was supposed to be burnt as a sacrifice before the rest of the animal was cooked and eaten. And who would be expected to know that? The priests. But no, they don't care about that. They just want their tucker. So, taking advantage of the whole situation. And the servant would say, "Oi, you there! The priest doesn't want his meat boiled today. Give him some raw meat so we can have a barbie. And usually the people were reasonable and said, no worries, mate. Take what you want. Just let us sacrifice the fat to Yahuwah first. No, the servant would reply. Give it over now, or I'll bloody take it myself by force. Greedy, brutish bullies. That's what was happening. That's what they were doing. This was what the sacrificial system, the beautiful sacrificial system of forgiveness and acceptance and reconnection with Yahusha, this is what it had become only after about 400 years, I'd say. So, give it over by force. There they are there. Meat hook. Stick it in, and whatever comes out is yours. You can't take all of it, obviously, because the people are there to do a certain thing, but whatever you take, it's yours. So, greedy, brutish bullies. Eli's sons showed no respect for the sacrifices that the people offered. They despised the whole activity. And this was a terribly evil crime in Yahusha's eyes, and he saw red with fury. So, let's explore this a little bit. We've got Eli and his two sons who are abusing the system big time. Enter the priesthood mafioso. We see here just how far the priesthood had been seduced to the dark side, and the evil behaviour of Eli's sons were among the worst. This meat-stealing scene here sounds just like a gangland movie, where the mafioso wander into small shops of frightened shopkeepers and help themselves to whatever caught their eye as payment for their so-called services. Remember those movies? The thugs come in and take what they want. This had apparently become a custom at Shiloh that was expected and accepted. This was expected and accepted. That's how long it's been going on for. And these sons of Eli don't seem to get any resistance or argument from the people who came to worship and sacrifice. In fact, this dishonourable practice even had a certain spirituality falsely attached to it, because the idea, in their minds, the idea was that by the priests blindly sticking their hook into the murky stew, whatever became attached to their hooks was now Yahusha's. And so they only stabbed at each pot once, accepting whatever they caught as Yahusha's will, however much or little meat they skewered. Like those things in the arcades that go over and you've got to try and pick up the soft toys. You only get one go usually, and whatever you get is yours, and if you don't get it, tough tits. So this became a spiritual thing, like throwing a dice or something, just a fun little game that was happening at the... Wasn't fun though, was it? Because they're stealing their food. So it was bad enough that Eli's sons badly mistreated those who they had authority over and were supposed to be serving. Priesthood is supposed to serve. Servant industry. That's bad enough. But the far bigger crime was against Yahusha, because they were robbing what belonged to him. How does Yahusha feel about robbing what's his set-apart property? They were robbing what belonged to him and ignoring the set-apart rituals he established in favour of their own ways. Their own way. How much do we love our own way? Frankie Wanky, Frankie Sinatra, we love it. How much do we love our own way? They'd actually abandoned the sacrificial system's pattern, divine pattern, as given with the instructions of the blueprints to the tabernacle and everything, for their own ways. This was considered an intentional or a high-handed crime, referring, of course, to a type of evil behaviour that there was no atonement for in the sacrificial system. Sacrificial system could bring you peace and reconnection with your Creator and forgiveness. Legal, legitimate forgiveness, washing away of lawless. But it couldn't if it was high-handed, intentional crimes. That's why Yahusha was needed, because his blood can deal with those. What made their behaviour particularly terrible was that as Yahusha's priests, they actually made the sacrifices that were being done worthless. They made them worthless. Imagine what these Israelites thought as they watched men who were supposed to be the most upright, set-apart examples of Yahusha and his anointed representatives on earth turned this procedure of sacrifices into little more than a personal food festival. Remember, these sacrifices were at the center of the Hebrews' harmony with Yahusha as part of the sacrificial system. It's the system that forgave them, cleansed their consciences, and brought them closer to their Creator. Remember all the different sacrifices we went through? The ascending near and the meat, the intimate peace offering, and the love grain offering, and the purification offering. All these offerings were to reconnect you with Yahusha. So, and what are they doing with it? These are the guys that are supposed to be teaching the people how to create, to connect with their Creator. Many of these people had travelled long distances in difficult conditions to do as Yahusha instructed them in Leviticus. And they were met by white-robed thugs. Many people had travelled long distances, and as they were met by white-robed thugs who hid behind Yahusha's set-apart name, that they might profit personally. Hiding behind Yahusha's set-apart name, that they might profit personally. Apparently this went on for quite a long time, and it had just become the norm. And who's going to mention the elephant in the room? Sounds like the carpetbaggers of today, eh? Using Yahusha's beautiful name to stand in the doorway, set up a marketplace, and make a profit. Those scoundrels, yeah. It's not Yahusha's way. How does Yahusha feel about this behavior? Where was the justice? It was about to happen. So this is just setting the scene, because often you can just read past all that. You just go, oh yeah, they're sticking forks in meat, and yeah, what's that about? Yeah, they're a bit odd, a bit cruel. But when you look at the history of it, what the priests were supposed to be and what they actually are, just like we look at what the bride is supposed to be today, and those who might be called to lead or teach or prophesy, or all the many gifts that are mentioned, how those gifts are supposed to operate. And when you look and see how they are operating, and what people, men and women, are being lifted up, and their teaching lifted up front and center, and everything revolves around the teaching. Why? Because if you didn't get it the first time, oh look, you can buy it. Oh look, you can buy it. Yeah, you know. So it's insane. Yahusha hates it. Where's the justice? Let's keep reading. Back to Samuel. And this is where Samuel's growing up. This is how Samuel's growing up in the system. And the boy Samuel served Yahusha at the tabernacle with Eli, and he wore a special linen garment, either a loincloth or a jacket or a vest, worn only by priests. And the clothes his mother made for him, he wore them too. A sleeveless coat or robe that was worn by priests. Samuel obviously was a small child, but his mother made him clothes just like those worn by the priests. Hannah would bring new clothes for Samuel every year when she and her husband came to offer sacrifices at Shiloh. Remember, they came once a year? Naturally, little Samuel would spend time with his mother and father when they came on their annual visits, and Eli would encounter Samuel's parents and speak with them too. Normally, a priest or Levite would not start their required service in the tabernacle until they were 25. We saw that back when we were talking about the Nazarite vow. Normally, a Levite priest wouldn't start in the tabernacle until they were 25. However, because Samuel was a rare combination of a Levite as well as a Nazarite for life, we find him learning the priestly ropes as a growing child who naturally needed larger clothes on a regular basis. Kept growing. So each year when Elkanah's family would journey to Shiloh to offer sacrifices at the festival, Hannah would bring a new coat for her young son. Don't think of that, do we? All the priests that, they don't grow up, not growing after 25 years old. But Samuel would have needed new clothes on a regular basis, so his mother would bring him new clothes. And Eli would always bless Elkanah and his wife when he saw them, saying, Samuel was born to you because you asked, and now you've given him back to Yahuwah for service. So may he bless you with more children to take his place. And after Eli had blessed them, Elkanah and Hannah would return home. And Yahusha was indeed kind to Hannah, and she had 3 more sons and 2 daughters. But Samuel grew up at the tabernacle in Shiloh. So he had definitely opened her womb. What's that? 3 more sons and 2 daughters. So she'd had 6 children. So, yeah, that's a fairly decent blessing if you ask me. Now, Eli was very old, and he heard what his sons were doing to the people of Israel. We just went through all that, what his sons are doing. That's just skimming the surface. Eli was very old, and he heard what his sons were doing to the people of Israel, that they were even having sex with the women who worked at the entrance to the tabernacle. Why are you doing these hideous, awful things? He asked them. I've been hearing nothing but complaints about you from all of Yahuwah's people. If you harm another person, Yahuwah can make things right between the 2 of you, my sons. If you harm another person, Yahuwah can make things right between the 2 of you, my sons. But if you are wicked and commit a crime against him and his instructions for us, no one can help you. And at this point, a lot of the commentaries go into the whole bridging the gap, and there's no sacrifice for this kind of sinfulness and this and that. And they go pages and pages and pages and pages of, the sins between man and sins between man and God, all this stuff that they go on with. And I just cut all that out. We know what that means, If you offend one another and you make it right, Yahusha can mend the relationship. But if you offend him, and remember, blasphemy is just like assaulting him, punching him in the face. If you do that to him, So, these sons are dealing with the set-apart property of Yahusha, so they're abusing it, living in blasphemy. So, if you're wicked and commit a crime against him and his instructions for us, no one can help you. But Yahusha had already decided to kill them, so he kept them from listening to their father. He hardened their hearts, similar to the Pharaoh of Egypt. It came to Eli's attention that apart from all the other wicked things his sons were doing, now they were even using women who served at the tabernacle for their own sexual pleasures. These women were not temple prostitutes that were so common to the Canaanite religious services. Rather, they were Levites who performed menial duties and were likely bullied into submission by Phinehas and Hophni. And even though the sex acts were not being performed inside the sanctuary itself, probably in a side room, to do such abominable things so close to Yahusha's dwelling place brought huge defilement. I mean, remember Aaron's 2 sons? Who were just a bit tipsy, we think, and, just burning the wrong kind of incense? Zap! You dead, And these guys are shagging next to the... it's how things have fallen, yeah? And each day Yahusha and his people grew fonder and fonder of Samuel as he served before Yahusha. And serving before Yahusha is actually a Hebrew expression that means that Samuel was serving Yahusha directly in a divinely acceptable way. We can see the difference between the behavior and nature of Samuel compared to Eli's 2 worthless sons. Here, the writer is telling us that Samuel had an intimate relationship with Yahusha from a very early age. And while we might question whether Samuel should be doing priestly functions at 5 or 6 years old, we can also see that young children can totally grasp who Yahusha is and form a close bond with him. Sometimes even more than the adults can with all their hang-ups. So it's never too early to start teaching our children about Yahusha and help them form a relationship with him. I've got a 6-year-old son, and the things that you say, they're like a sponge, these kids, you know. You don't think they're listening, but they are. You could be reading, the kids were getting into some of these videos, Ruth and Judges and Joshua, they were doing some of those things, downloading some of the cartoons, they were Christian ones, and Hunter, my 6-year-old son, put him to bed at night and he's just got all this information spreading out. He's like a sponge, he just remembers it all. So it's never too young, you know, they're never too young to learn how to have a relationship with Yahusha. So Samuel's been slowly trained and lifted up and having a good reputation in the temple life, tabernacle life. And Eli and his 2 sons are just bastards, you know. One day, a man of Elohim, this is an actual man, it's an Ish. Ish means man. Ish Elohim, physical messenger, not a spiritual one. A man of Elohim, some just random guy. He came to Eli and spoke this message to him. Came to Eli and spoke to him this message from Yahusha, directly from Yahusha. This is where it gets interesting, guys. Yahusha says, "Did I not come to your people when they were slaves to the king of Egypt? Your father Aaron was literally standing in the Pharaoh's house when I spoke my wonders through him and delivered your people. And out of all the tribes of Israel, didn't I choose your father to be my high priest, to offer incense and wear the shoulder garments before me? Your whole family was set apart to offer sacrifices and burn incense to me and find out how I want my people to live and behave." What an immense privilege. All the offerings transformed by fire were to make my nation acceptable, and that's why I instructed everyone to bring their sacrifices here to the tabernacle where I live. I even allowed you and your family to keep some of those sacrifices that weren't offered to me on the altar. Even though Eli was not the one doing all the wicked behavior, he had the authority and power to stop his sons. He could have and should have taken all measures necessary to end their blasphemy. But like so many fathers, as we are, like so many fathers have done since Adam, we let our emotions and our screwed up priorities rule our behavior in our families, and Eli did the same. We're all the same, guys. Fathers. We have the opportunity to teach properly or just let chaos reign. So take all these behaviors, look at your life, look at your family. It's a mirror. The living words are a mirror, remember? Take it on. So Yahusha's had enough of this. He's even let them have some of the sacrifices that weren't offered at my altar. I will continue to be kind to Yisrael, but not your family anymore. No way. If I let anyone from your family be a priest, his life will be full of sadness and sorrow, and most of your men will die a violent death. And to show you I'm dead set fair dinkum about this, your 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas, will be struck dead like a doornail on the same day. What about this? Just from a random guy that comes in, speaking from Yahusha. Your 2 sons will be struck dead. And now, you go and honour your sons instead of me? And now, you go and honour your sons instead of me? Go and get royally stuffed. You don't respect the sacrifices and offerings that are brought to me, and you've all become so greedy and fat from eating the best parts. I'm Yahuwah, damn it, the Elohim of Yisrael. I promised to let your family serve and walk with me as priests. But the deal's off now, Jack. Nah, forget it. I'm done. you know very well that I lift up and favour anyone who loves and esteems me. But you can be damn skippy, I'll put a curse on anyone who hates me. So the time's coming when I'll kill you and everyone else in your family, and not one of you will live to an old age. In fact, my tabernacle is now an enemy to you vipers. Your arm, your family, your household, all cut off. I'm out. As they say on Shark Tank, thanks, but I'm out. So, what a word. Imagine getting that. You're the high priest, the highest ranking of anything in Yisrael, the high priest. And you're getting this word from Yahusha. Your family's cut off, you're cut off, your sons are cut off, your arms cut off, your legs cut off, everything's cut off, mate. Cut off. You are fired. You're fired. So, I'm now raising up my own priest, referring to his future bride, who will be trustworthy and follow my heart continually. And I will build them a mighty steadfast house, not made with hands, to serve me in, and allow him to assist and walk before my chosen anointed king, Yahusha. But if anyone is left from your family, old Levitical system, he will come to my priest, obedient priesthood of Melchizedek, and beg for money or a little bread, saying, please put me in a priestly position and let me serve, so I'll at least have something to eat. Meaning it's just a job. They just want to eat. They just want to prosper. It's just a job. Religious lifestyle of carpetbagger behaviour. So this obviously wasn't received as being about the bride and Yahusha. Many think it's about Zadok later on, the priest, around the time of David. But when you look at it prophetically, with the hindsight of history, where we're at in history, when you look at it, it's pretty obvious. I'm now raising up my own priest, my own priesthood, Be trustworthy, follow my heart continually. I will build them a mighty steadfast house, not made with hands, to serve me and allow him to assist me. See, it's obviously about his bride. But like the bride today, there will always be the sneaky, wicked, filthy little carpetbaggers trying to get in there, for religious position and possession. I understand this. I've had those desires in the past too, wanting to be a teacher, wanting to be this, wanting to be that, and thinking I had to do this and thinking I had to do that. And Yahusha soon slaps it down and goes, get with it. You're just a normal Joe Blow, get on with it. Love your family, love your wife, love your friends, love me most of all, yeah? So get off this whole stupid mindset. Get with it. Come back down to earth. Yahusha is there for us in that capacity. The sign of Yahusha's punishment upon Eli's family would be that in one day both Hophni and Phinehas would die. After this, those from Eli's family who would have held the high, prestigious position of priests and been given the choice cuts of sacrificial meat and the best produce offerings brought by Israel, they would instead have to beg for the smallest of tasks just to earn a scrap of bread to eat. Interesting. It's going to get interesting because underneath the surface, when we look at this, I found this so fascinating. Let's continue this theme about the priest wars, because this really is like gangland mafia, and you'll see why in a moment. Remember back in Judges, we were shocked to find that the priesthood was useless, disrespected, and held very little power or influence in Israel. This is why. These dickheads here are why. These guys gave the priesthood the reputation that we read about in Judges, because the abuse of power by Eli's family and Yahusha's punishment for it practically dissolved the dynasty of priests. Of course, the office still continued, but as far as the tribes were concerned, the 12 tribes, as far as the nation were concerned, the Levites had blown it. They were a joke. So when we read back in Judges how the priests weren't really having any power or say or anything, this is why, because of Eli and his two sons. So don't forget that Samuel and Judges is happening pretty much at the same time. Historically, in different parts of Israel, this story of Samuel is happening at the same time we read about all the judges that were being raised up. So to understand the prophetic words that Yahusha spoke upon the priesthood, we have to review the history and circumstances of this Levite mafia. And this might get a little bit complicated. I apologize, you might have to watch it a couple of times, but it blew my brains out, as I like charts. I like maps, I like things that make things easier. So when I saw this map, I just went, my mouth hit the floor. I thought, wow, this is why half the problems is happening. Priest wars. And before I start reading, in Exodus, of course, not Exodus, Genesis, we had Levi. Levi was one of Jacob's 12 sons. Levi, you had Reuben and Simeon and Levi. Well, Levi had 3 sons, Gershom, Kohath, and Merari. These are the 3 Levitical clans. One clan used to deal with the packing up of the tabernacle and moving it on to the next location. This tribe here, the Kohath, I'm pretty sure they were dealing with the inside jobs, inside the inner court, whatever. And this tribe did something else again. So these 3 clans, thousands of people in each one, dealt with everything. Kohath had a son, Amram. Amram had Aaron, Moses, and Miriam. This is where we're up to in the story. So Exodus is here. So Aaron, the high priest, we go from here. Aaron. So just remember this as we go on. We've got Aaron, the high priest. And remember, he had the 2 sons who were struck dead. Remember, Nadab and Abihu were stuffing around in the set-apart place, and they got struck dead. He was the eldest, then he was the next eldest. Then technically the firstborn is Eleazar. So, the firstborn son of the high priest continues the line of the high priest. Got that? Aaron, his firstborn was Eleazar, first remaining alive, Eleazar. Down this line here. It should have always been in Aaron's line. But see here, Aaron had another son, Ithamar. And he was still a son of Aaron. So somewhere down the line here through history, what power play happened here? The high priest changed line from Uzi over to Eli. Eli is not, he's a descendant of Aaron obviously, but he's not a descendant of Aaron's firstborn. And the high priest was supposed to stay in the line of the firstborn. See this line here? I hope I'm making sense of this. Abishua, Buki, Uzi. Around about here, see the little mafia guy with his shotgun and his bag of money? Something's going on here, Bonnie and Clyde style. Something's gone on here and shifted the priesthood over to this. There's been a takeover. And Eli's now got it. And his line down here. This is the youngest son. He's not supposed to have the priesthood. So, over to here. And then finally, and I'm going to read all this so it'll make sense, but I'm just explaining it first. Eventually, at the time of David, we had 2 high priests. Apparently, I haven't read it yet. There's 2 high priests. There's Zadok and there's Abiathar. 2 high priests. And there's a feuding priesthood going on. Yeah? Priest wars. So I just want to show you the picture first and explain it, what we're looking at here. The high priest line should always be in this green circle here. Somehow it got shifted over to Eli. And ever since that happened, it's been dissolved practically. The reputation got shot. It's a joke as far as Israel's concerned. The priesthood's got no power. They're just mafia. They're just hoods, And now Yahusha's come along and said, you're done. You're fired. Your son's dead. So now that we've looked at the chart, let's read this and explain it. It'll make a bit more sense now. Eli was the descendant of Ithamar, the youngest son of Aaron, Ithamar. So by rights, Eli should not have held the high position of high priest. Eli should not be the high priest because he is from the youngest son. because the descendants of Eleazar, the highest, the eldest surviving son of Aaron, making him the firstborn, should have continually carried that position. So it should have been from this son here. But apparently, Uzi was the last known high priest. There's Uzi. Uzi was the last known high priest in Eleazar's line. Eleazar. Uzi was the last one. Up to that point. And then, for reasons unknown, Eli, see here, Eli of the family of Ithamar was granted the position. But why? Surely this transfer of power was due to some kind of circumstance. Probably that none of Uzi's sons was strong or capable enough to hold such a position of prominence as high priest over Yisrael. Because remember, until Yisrael finally had a king, it fell to the high priest to rule as the highest authority over the 12 tribes. So there must have been a bit of a heated conversation, a bit of a heated board meeting going on here saying, your son's no good, he's not strong enough, maybe he's a bit of a sissy mouth, who knows? He's not going to be the next leader of Yisrael as the high priest. But we can do it. So they've shifted the high priest over to this son. So, the judges, who of course existed at the same time as the high priests, were only occasional deliverers, who only rescued their own particular tribe from some kind of situation, and never had any kind of far-reaching national authority over Israel as the high priest did. So how is it? How is it that Yahusha's people could find themselves in such a hopeless, dysfunctional situation? Remember, we're talking about tribalism, and the battle for position and power never ends. And the priesthood was no different. But they were supposed to be set apart, different, a shining example. But it's still baffling. How did Eli come into power? We know that the family line of Eleazar didn't end because in David's time, Zadok, a descendant of Eleazar, became a high priest and even served as a co-high priest with Abiathar and then Ahimelech, who were descendants of Eli. So that's just later on, we're going to find out all that. Zadok and Abiathar later on. So that we know that the descendants are still going. It's not like the line fizzled out and became extinct. No, we know they're still alive because later on down here, his descendant becomes a high priest as well as this one. So, during David's reign, we had a situation of dueling high priests serving simultaneously. One from Eli's line, the other from Eleazar's line. Later we'll see that the high priest Abiathar was removed from office, and so Zadok alone was high priest for a time. But then King Solomon reinstated Abiathar and removed Zadok. You don't think there was hardball politics going on 3,000 years ago? So once again the line of Eli were the high priests, back and forward between these two sons of Aaron. So this was the priest wars that's going on because, and what was the advantage of being a high priest and in the priestly line? You got to do what these guys were doing with their fish hook and stick it in there and stealing people's meat and having power and prominence, position, possession, all that sort of stuff, you know. So the days of Hophni and Phinehas are returning. Don't we see this behaviour all around us in the bride? People abusing their position, abusing their effects on people, abusing the scriptures, abusing Yahusha's name, standing behind his name as a way to make money, a way to lift themselves up. Even if they get no money out of it, a way to make their life meaningful, a way to have a running legacy or a position or a, remembrance. Who knows what on earth goes through people's cracked up heads. But when we look at the coming chapters after Yahusha spoke these words of judgment over Eli, Yahusha's just told him, that's off, you're fired. So when we look at the coming chapters after that, the priesthood lost virtually all authority and appeal. And soon Samuel, as a kind of hybrid priest, judge, prophet, became the highest authority figure, political and spiritual, in Israel. However, since Samuel was not a legitimate priest, by any traditional priestly bloodline from Aaron, i.e. even though his Levite lineage could be traced back to Kohath, he wasn't a son of Aaron. Got that? So even though Samuel can be traced back to Kohath, he's not a specific son of Aaron. Got that? So, what are we up to? So even though Samuel was not even though his Levite lineage could be traced back to Kohath, it wasn't so. The obedient priest that Yahusha would raise up to serve his anointed could not have been Samuel. We're talking about the scripture now, in back when Yahusha said, I will raise up my own priesthood now, those who will be obedient to me. And this obedient priest, well, the obedient priest to serve the anointed could not have been Samuel. Many think that the actual obedient priest might have been Zadok, which is very possible. But when we abstractly discern through Yahusha's spirit, we see that the obedient line of priesthood would be his own first fruit bride, washed in his blood and empowered by his spirit within them. That makes sense to me up here when he's talking about, you're fired, you're cut off, I will raise up my own priest, you know. He will come to my priest and beg for money, all that sort of stuff. Talking prophetically about a royal, a faithful and obedient priesthood who will finally have a priesthood that will be obedient. He's talking about a new line of priesthood that will be his own first fruit bride, washed in his blood, empowered by his own spirit within them. That's how they'd be obedient. He'd have the power. They'd have the power within them. Even more, Eli would live to see his two sons die. Shortly we'll read about the loss of the Ark of the Blood Covenant witness to the Philistines in battle, and in that battle Hophni and Phinehas were killed on the same day along with 30,000 Israelite soldiers. So what we have here is again exactly as spoken in Hannah's song. Yahusha will reverse the fortunes of men according to his will and his purposes. The Almighty Yahusha of Yisrael weighed Eli's family and took action according to his justice. He made the mighty into the lowly and brought the lowly into power. Eli's descendants would have to beg for bread, but the descendants of Eleazar, who had been denied their rightful position as high priests, would, starting with Zadok in David's time, they'd again have power, at least for a time. Isn't all this priesthood politics insanity? But it's exactly the same behaviour as we see happening within the bride of believers today, isn't it? Pride, power and possession. And Yahusha hates it. So if you see this type of behaviour, get as far away from it as you can, because judgment is coming. And it starts firstly right at the altar, right at the tabernacle, right at the priesthood, among his bridal priests. The 21st century shining examples. So that was a heavy one. I mean, look at what's going on. Speaking of insanity, that's what's happening in the world today. But that's the world, that's religion. I'm talking to the bride. The bride who now services the divine portal, the tabernacle, dwelling place, temple of his presence. You know, the ark is on our hearts, the interdimensional portal between connections where we commune, we can talk, communicate with Yahusha. That we are to look after this temple, look after this dwelling place, you know. And how are we treating it? And other people's as well. How do we treat each other? It's all about behavior, guys. And Yahusha's standing up here and saying to the high priest and his sons, you're done. Would you ever want to be in a place where Yahusha says that to you? I am done with you, no longer working with you, through you. Done. That would be the most heart-crushing thing to ever hear. No, we want to hear, come with me, good and faithful servant. That's what we want to hear. Come into the rest. Come into the wedding feast. That's what we want to hear. And we've only got one life and one opportunity and one invitation. So it's up to us to make it, guys. Everything you're going through in your day, as we learnt with Hannah, as we've learnt within the priesthood here, everything is being done by Yahusha in your life to get your attention. It's not demons doing this to you. It's not other people doing it to you. Oh, that's all happening. But Yahusha is the one making you feel the way you feel. Other people can't get inside you and make you feel. They can say things, but you don't do the rules. So if you don't do the 3 rules, you just react to anything anybody says, like I have. Take everything personally. Fight and argue and bitch around and, don't let them have what they're saying. No, I'm going to fight and argue. And, No. Stupid. You're letting all this happen to yourself, and Yahusha's flogging you because he hates that behavior. He wants you to wake up to yourself. So keep going, guys. You're not alone in this. We're all going through the same thing. And Yahusha's had enough of the BS. He wants a genuine, sincere, truthful bride that will worship him, behave sincerely. Spirit and truth. See you later.